Hi, I'm Rob, the Dungeon Tutor. Today in this session, I'm tackling the question, what's the experience of a role-playing game and what do I do? Good question, but it does require a little bit of exploration. See, your average person playing a role-playing game has one of two jobs. Either you are the game master, the person who's running the game, and you might wear any number of different hats for that. If you're playing Dungeons & Dragons, you're called the Dungeon Master. If you're playing Call of Cthulhu, you're called the Keeper, but it basically boils down to the same thing. Or you're a player, and there's usually multiple players in any one group. If you've ever seen on YouTube or Twitch or something like that, people live streaming a game, there's a game master, almost always, and a number of players. And there's a good reason for that. First of all, the player generally represents a protagonist within the story, some character that the story is going to revolve around, and their actions are going to have impact in the story because they're the heroes. Or the villains. There are some games that go that way. But generally, your players are interested in playing one character, one important character to the story. How important it is can vary from game to game and from story to story, but they generally play one. Sometimes they might play multiple characters or have other interests besides playing just that character, but in general, they play a single character. And it's just like a story in its own way. They are a character involved in another world, or if it's our world, it's not the exact same world, and doing things in that world that make sense in that world. So if they are, for example, a warrior in a fantasy kingdom, they sharpen their weapon skills and they go out to test their skills against monsters or whatever challenges. Or maybe a story comes to them and they have to engage with the world in a way that they try to accomplish their goals and objectives, even if that's just survival in some cases. And the beauty of role-playing games is that often the players create their character and come up with their own motivations and skills, and where that intersects with the game master's world defines their purpose and oftentimes defines the challenges that they'll go up against during the course of the story. Now, sometimes the players may have pre-generated characters that they are given a choice of or just given, and this will already make some of the decisions for them. What is their task? What is their role? What is their goals and purposes and things like that? But oftentimes there's a certain amount of interplay. In almost all circumstances, the players take on a part of the character within the story in a way that they hopefully feel comfortable with. Maybe they might find themselves talking as their characters in a first-person view, and try to affect a voice as their character. Can be. Some people never feel comfortable with that and choose to just say, my character does this, or Anarabis does this, and it's fine. Not everybody likes first person. Some people, though, just get surprised on how easy it is to slip and say, well, I'm going to do this. You're not as a player, your character is, but we get the idea. The distinction can become blurred when you get into the game and really get interested in it. Being a player is about staying faithful to your character, whatever that means. If that means that your character is trying to accomplish a goal, that means trying to do things that help you to accomplish that goal. It almost always means trying to survive and stay alive and healthy. Most people want that, although there are exceptions sometimes, but still, generally you want to try to make decisions that your character would make, and by doing that, you make the world come to life a little bit more and be more realistic for everyone. Now, on the other side of the table, or screen, depending on how your layout is the Game Master. And the Game Master should generally be in a place where everybody can see them and hear them clearly, because they are the narrator of the story, they are the referee of the rules, they are the person who is controlling everybody else that the player characters are not. So while the players control their characters in the story, their avatars in some cases, they're the player characters. Everybody else is a non-player character under control of the Game Master. And that means the Game Master has more work to do than any of the players do typically. That means that they have to have an idea of the story, the events that are going to unfold for the players. If that involves having a module or an adventure, that involves understanding it and knowing why it's a story and why the events happen and the things that are going to be said and events as they happen. They have to understand all that in advance. So it's a little bit more work, certainly. It's the player's job to react. It's the game master's job to know and kind of have the situation in hand. Obviously, this comes in differing levels depending on the group. Some people, like myself, have a game master who's been doing it for a while and is very comfortable in the role, and therefore likes to take a certain amount of control in the narrative. Things happen, the players then react to it. If the players do something on their own, then the game master reacts to it because the world unfolds before the eyes of the players. And that's reported through what their characters see, hear, do, feel, etc. So the game master is important as a narrator to make the world kind of unfold for the players. As they look in different places, they see the things that their characters would see, and that's all relayed to them by the game master. As they encounter different people and interact, the game master is the one who gives them the experience. Do they walk into a shop, for instance, to buy a new sword, and do they in character say, "Ah, hello shopkeep, I'm interested in a new sword"? If the game master is up to it, the game master might reply in the role of the merchant. "Oh, well, welcome, sir. You're looking for a sword. I'm assuming you've paid the sword tax, all right? I need to see a receipt for that. Yep, all right. You got your license to carry a sword. Ah, come and look at my fine wares. You'll find I have swords from all over the region, and all the finest that you'll find in this town." Maybe you'll do that. Maybe you'll just say, the merchant greets you and begins to show you his wares, trying to tempt you to buy one of his brand new shining swords. And there's no one right way of doing it. Especially as you get more and more comfortable with it, you'll find a style and a rhythm. But that's the game master's job, is to basically lay out the consequences, the results of what the characters do. The difference between a player and a game master involves the amount of give and take. The game master opens up the world for the players take what their characters see and do things within it, and the game master constantly takes what the players give them and gives back. So it's back and forth, or oftentimes it should be. It's up to the players to do different things that their characters are interested in, and when this happens, it can be magical, as you really are beginning to unfold a story with a bunch of other characters rather than just the folks sitting around the table. But the game master also has to keep track of things like, in a fight, how healthy the different combatants are. Some of them even go so far as to keep track of how healthy the players' characters are, but usually that's up to the players to keep track of themselves. The Game Master usually has more than enough to do with every monster or every other character that the players might end up having to get involved with. And of course, the Game Master oftentimes has a lot of discretion onto what the tone, timbre, and experience is going to end up being. If, for instance, they really love the thrill of combat, the visceral sense of conflict, they might involve a great deal of it in a game. Now, if your players aren't ones that really enjoy that, there can be some problems, and that's why communication is so important. Some Game Masters really love the experience of roleplay, and in that capacity, they will do everything they can to try to get their players to open up and roleplay their interactions with other characters. Again, possibly using voice, possibly using gesture and motion, and setting up circumstances that the players can't just slash their way through, but have to interact with others to get by. Some really love puzzles, challenges, and riddles that make the players just go, wow, this is deep. And that's fine for some groups, and other groups don't appreciate that as much. So, again, communication. To make sure that everybody's having a good time, it's good to know what everybody likes. So Game Masters should take into account what their players are going to enjoy and possibly not commit them to something that they might really hate. So that's the basic experience of it. The Game Master opens up with, this is what your characters see, or this is what your characters are thinking, or good game masters don't tell the players what their characters do. They generally let the players come up with their own minds what they're going to do, and try not to put words in their mouth, but occasionally to frame a setting you have to make some assumptions or just present a general circumstance to let the players bounce off of. Eventually, everybody comes to understand and know these characters that are played, possibly through the course of several sessions. But in that, the role-playing experience is basically the players take what the game masters give them in terms of narration, come back, and if something has to be decided on how to find out if this works, what happens, that's what the rules are for. Ultimately, the game master is usually the one who's in charge of the rules to figure out, you're going to do this, I need you to roll this. You're going to do this, you're so good at it, you don't need to roll. Just your character does this, and it's cool. That's all things that being in a game, in a framework with rules, covers. And that's why we have all these different sets of rules for different games. Some games can resolve things that come up in that game better than others. So that's why people have their preferences. That's why people constantly keep coming up with new ways to play these games. So there hasn't been a perfect one yet, but you know, everyone has their favorites. So the players take what the game master gives them, interacts on behalf of their characters. They're oftentimes the best advocates for their characters as they play them. And between the two, they figure out what happens and move on to the next section. And that can be anything as sweeping as superheroes who are learning of the next great challenge that needs their powers to resolve, or it can just be the heroes choosing which tavern they're going to go to have a meal and a drink after a serious dungeon crawl. And a game is just a continuing set of challenges and choices by the players and the game master to move things forward. So, does it have to be deep and meaningful? No. Sometimes it can be very trivial. Sometimes a game may be puddle deep, but may be very vast. You can have games that are incredibly deep with a small scope. It all depends on what you want to play, the game that you're playing, the people you're playing with. So that would be my answer to what is the experience like. The answer is, like most things, it's going to vary. But in general, that's what playing is like. Back in the day, on another channel called Lair of Omnici, I made a video called The Experience of the Game, where I go into a lot more detail than this. It's not a terrible one to look at, but I think this answers the question quite well. And it's a good way to end the session. So, thank you for joining me. If you have any questions about this or you want me to elaborate on any details, feel free to comment. I'll see it, and I'll probably end up making a video about the response for it for you. So, another session. Maybe not a bad thing. And how different games change that formula can be very interesting to explore. And if you have questions about your own experiences and things that may not have worked, or different things that you're trying that you'd like to bring out before others, great. Great opportunities to do that, either in the comments below or go to the Dungeon Tutor Facebook group and go ahead and ask there. Be great to see people and answer your questions and have a dialogue. So, until the next session, though, I hope you enjoyed this, and I also hope that you can find a game, play, roll some dice, have some fun, and until that next time, farewell.